Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Avenue A, where we talk acting, networking, and the industry. Welcome back for those of you who have seen us before, joined us on the show before. Welcome. Hey Dana, looking forward to the show. That's my sister and producer. Hi Sissy. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. I'm your host, Kelsey Bentz. A little bit about the show. I'm a recent grad of NYU, and I graduated into the pandemic with an acting degree. So I had the idea to start this show, which is a live stream, fully virtual show where I invite guests, other artists in the industry to come on with me, and I interview them about their experience with acting and the arts industries in general. So welcome. I'm really excited about our guest today. So a little bit about him. His name is GIL ZABARSKY. So GIL is an actor, writer, and director based in New York City, where he graduated with honors from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. GIL starred alongside Saturday Night Live alum Rachel Dratch in Teacher of the Year, a short film he co-wrote with his writing partner Chris Meduno, which premiered at the 2012 Tribeca Film Festival. GIL and Chris had the chance to shoot Teacher of the Year, which is now called Tenured, as a feature-length film with Fox Digital Studio, and GIL was able to star in it again, this time alongside Kate Flannery of The Office fame. It premiered at the 2015 Tribeca Film Festival and is now available on Amazon Prime in the US and UK. GIL co-wrote and starred in a pilot titled It's a Hit, which was produced by hybrid distribution/production company The Orchard in Los Angeles. The pilot also starred Abby Elliott, Tim Matheson, and Tyler Hilton, and premiered at Series Fest in 2016, where it won the Virgin Produced Award. GIL and Chris recently wrote a second feature film for Fox called Hugh Man, two independent films called Tuesdays with Satan and Deep Cut, a first season of a horror series for Eli Roth's Crypt TV, and in collaboration with Fox Digital, a holiday commercial for Mars Candy Company, which GIL made a crucial cameo in. And they're currently shopping a pilot about a middle-aged man who happens to be a werewolf called Midwolf Crisis, and just completed a Hulu original script for Disney called Carved. Additionally, at NYU, GIL studied at both the Atlantic Acting School and Stone Street Studios, and he worked for Simon & Goodman Picture Company as a translator and editor on Strangers No More, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Short in 2011. GIL has been described as, quote, fine to work with. So we're super excited to have GIL joining us on the show today. Welcome. Hi, GIL.
Hello, thank you. I am fine to work with.
Yeah, I can attest to that. You're just fine.
Thank you. I just want people to know that.
I think it's a good way to like level the ground, you know.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for asking me. This is awesome. I love that you're doing this.
Thank you. A little background for the viewers watching. GIL and I met each other at Stone Street Studios this past semester, and we worked together there, and yeah, it was a blast. So it's nice to see you again all these months later.
Yes.
So I'm excited to have you on because you have your training in acting, but then, you know, you're doing a lot more writing work now and you're creating a lot more, but you're also able to star in your own works, which I think is the best of both worlds. So, and you know, you graduated from NYU, and
Yes.
so you know what that art school life is. So
Yes.
what piece of advice would you give to a smart, driven art student on their way into the quote unquote real industry?
Oh man. A couple of things. And I'm sure you've heard me say something similar to this before, because it's something I say a lot, but not to be cynical about it. But I think that a lot of times, especially when someone is young and wants to do something creative for a living and is at the hands of other people, teachers or mentors or directors or reps or other folks in the industry, um, who might have more experience than they do, or have attempted a similar career path for longer period of time. I think I think people are met with a lot of really bad advice that doesn't necessarily have their best interest in mind. Um, and I think that almost any advice a young creative person hears, including anything I'm saying now, literally anything you hear, has to be filtered through some sort of instinct about what you think your work needs,
Hmm.
and or what your process needs, or what your path is going to be. And there has to be a constant reminder in the back of your mind, um, that there will be many times where everyone in the world who's attempting to guide you is wrong and you are right, or at least you're holding on to an aspect of something that other people won't fully understand. And so the first piece of advice is there's two equally unhelpful ways to deal with that. I feel like you could shut out absolutely everything people have to say and then potentially miss the benefit of something that is actually great for you. And you could also assume that every single person who's in a position to give you advice is giving you something that's going to be crucial to your journey, where really I just think it's one more thing to be examined. So I think that's the first thing, is just assume that you know yourself well, or are getting to know yourself well. Be open to anything, but take nothing as more important than your own instincts about what you need. And the second sort of related piece of advice is you've definitely heard me say this before, Kelsey, but to remember that you don't have to believe in yourself at all to succeed. Um, as long as it doesn't affect your actions, or taking advantage of whatever's in your control, or taking the clear, organized, relentless steps you need to put yourself in a position to succeed, believing in yourself is icing on the cake. It makes things easier, but it's not essential. And I think that's probably important for people to hear, because it is made out to be some kind of crucial component to success, where really I think people can succeed in enormous ways and not a single day of their life believe in themselves. It's a separate thing. It's a separate quality of life thing people should look at, but it has nothing to do with success other than making it a little easier to go through the process, maybe.
That's interesting. So I'm wondering, like, how do you even find the motivation, or, keep going with all of the hard work and the hustle that it takes, to be in a career like this without believing in yourself? Like, how do you fully separate those two?
I think it's a couple of things. There's quality of life, and then there's the strides you're taking towards making a career dream happen.
Hmm.
And I think that the reason it's important to keep them separate is because people put an enormous amount of pressure on themselves to figure out those things at the same time, and they're actually not the same thing. It is possible to have an imbalanced approach where your quality of life is not that great, but you're making massive strides succeeding in your industry. And I've personally dealt with that a couple of different ways. I think the first, just for me psychologically, is to separate the two. And I've had to do that many times, where I feel like I had a huge opportunity to capitalize on, but there were days where I sort of felt actually that the motivation wasn't waiting there for me, or it felt like a drag, or it felt overwhelming, or I was actively putting aside stressful stuff in order to take advantage of an opportunity. And the way I started thinking about it is, I went through this weird phase of feeling like I needed motivation every single time to make stuff happen, and realizing that you don't actually need it as long as you're doing the work you need to do. And then realizing that you don't need motivation if you have discipline. Motivation is icing on the cake, but it's not reliable, unfortunately. It's not reliable. If you're counting on it, it won't always be there. But the more strides you make in your work, or the more you figure stuff out, motivation will find you. But then I came to another phase after that, which is to realize that just because you don't need motivation doesn't mean that it's not a great, healthy thing to work on finding.
Right.
So I know that's a very nitpicky way to define that, basically. Presley Brenner.
Hi, Presley.
I know that's a very nitpicky way to define that, but it's just been very important to me. It's been very important to me because over the past few years, I've had a lot of cool opportunities, and my relationship with motivation has frustrated the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I went the other way of being like that I don't ever fucking need it, but you do sort of need it to a degree just to really enjoy what you're doing and enjoy your life. So
Right.
I'm in the process of that. But I think the crucial thing to remember is that motivation and discipline are separate. Discipline is always there for you if you're willing to capitalize on it. Motivation, I think you earn over time, or at least embrace when it's there. And hopefully when things are going well, it's there more and more and more. It feeds itself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That really resonates with me. And I think you're spot on with the saying that motivation is separate from discipline, because discipline only requires the dedication to keep going no matter how you feel.
Yes.
And motivation is a feeling that you can't, tame, you can't control, you can't force yourself to have it.
Yes.
And that's something that I've struggled with a lot, is just like, what do you do when you're not feeling motivated? But at the end of the day, it's like, you just do it anyway because you're disciplined.
Yeah, it's motivation is fuel, but the
Right.
way I thought about it a lot is it's almost like if you're driving through the desert and you're in a car that stalls and it runs out of fuel.
Yeah.
Solution is not to sit in the car and just wait for someone to come along. It's to get out and push until you get to a place where you can refuel. And I've always, I think what I used to do is run out of fuel and then sit in the car.
Yeah.
Then I just kind of realized that they were separate things. That as long as there's anything in my control to get out of the car and push, that's the discipline part. And then magically you realize fuel motivation sort of finds you. That's the cool part.
Yeah.
You just can't totally rely on it, in my opinion. I hope that's not awful advice. It's just the most real advice I can give.
I think it's super true, super real, and I also think it's extremely timely for this moment that we're in.
Yes.
Because I know for me, I've really had to fall back on my own discipline the last few months just to get shit done and to just keep going despite how I feel or what the state of the world is or what the future is going to hold or like if this is even what the career looks like going forward. So I think that's a nice reminder, and it doesn't feel like a downer to me. It just feels true.
Yeah, I think it's.
So
I was just going to say one more thing about it is that it definitely shouldn't be a downer. I think it's ultimately very empowering. Because anytime my back has been up against the wall or I've been freaked out about stuff or low on motivation or fuel, the thing that's always saved my ass is just going back to basics of like what's in my control, what can I do here, and just taking everything on my list that's in my control one by one, even if it's going through the motions of it at first, just to jumpstart yourself back up.
Yeah, I find that I feel worse when I don't do it than I do doing it. So if that helps anyone. So the second part of that question, I feel like you kind of answered, but it was, what advice should college students ignore? But you sort of mentioned earlier how you hear a lot, and you can take what you want and leave what you don't want.
Yeah, and I'll give you just one more quick one. I think you should ignore the worst piece of advice ever in a creative community, which is that something has to be hard to be meaningful, and that if you're enjoying it, you're missing the point, which is obviously bullshit.
It is.
Love what you do for a living. It should be fulfilling and challenging. It doesn't have to be a traditionally positive experience depending on whatever you need. But I just think this weird fear-based thing of like the advice of just kind of like, are you suffering for your art? No, hopefully not. Hopefully you're not suffering and you're doing amazing things and making great art and being super successful. Because your happiest self is the version that's going to help the world, not the miserable suffering version of yourself,
Right. And no one else wants to work with someone who doesn't seem like they're having at least like a decent time in their work.
Yes, that's true.
So, how has a failure or maybe apparent failure set you up for later success? And do you have a favorite failure of yours?
Um, I, yeah, I mean, I definitely, I have, you know that I love Shark Tank. Um,
Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot, I've listened to a lot of Shark Tank people give talks and stuff, and
Mm.
there's a theme among them of just that the people they've seen succeed the most, it's not necessarily the ones who avoid failure, it's just how often you pick yourself back up. So I think it could be extremely valuable. I don't think I have a favorite one just because I hate failing so much.
Sure.
Um, and it brings me so much pain
Yeah.
that I'm not trying to, I understand the spirit of your question totally. But I think it's extremely valuable, but the failure I've had has been so painful and so bad that I resent like even the memory of it
Hmm.
while being aware that there's so many times that I needed it to better understand how to succeed in the future for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, without really saying what this project is, just because a lot of awesome people worked on it, and I don't want to take away from their time and energy. But I definitely had a project I was involved um, in the last couple years that I feel was an amazing opportunity that I was so wrapped up in the opportunity that I didn't take a second to actually go back to the thing I had created and ask myself if it was genuinely the best work I could do, and also ask myself if there was my own hype about it that I was buying into, or just sort of taking for granted that I'd figured things out enough that it was ready to go. And in my opinion, the end result is not as good as it could have been,
Hmm.
and not nearly as successful as it could have been, because I feel like I failed to take a step back and just remember how much I needed to just relentlessly keep working at doing the best work I possibly can. It almost felt uh, like maybe the failure there was dropping the ball on a system of working that I knew was important to me
Hmm.
because I assumed it was no longer necessary. I hate to be so vague about it.
Interesting.
I just don't want to put down something people worked on, but
No, yeah, of course. That's interesting to me. Can you say a little more about, like, was it a conscious sort of thing that you set it down, or was it more you just got wrapped up and so you sort of just didn't? Does that make sense?
it does make sense. Yeah, I think it was dismissing my own instincts
Mm.
about something being not 100% complete because I was wrapped up in some of the more glamorous aspects of it.
Sure.
And doing other things to further it along, but sort of ignoring, just going back to like the fundamentals of storytelling and script writing, and just asking myself brutally honestly, which I never had a problem doing in the past,
Yeah.
is the absolute best thing that's getting out to
Hmm.
people. And that stays with me. I mean, now I just feel like it's made me so paranoid now about that
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
So you're like very conscious of the root of the storytelling in all of your work going forward because of that.
Yeah, I like maybe almost my writing partner might even say like maybe almost like obsessively in the other direction,
Mm.
just like nitpicking every little thing, making absolutely sure every single thing feels perfect, just because in my own mind I go back to that other project and I feel like had I done this for that, it would have been successful in a very different way.
Mm.
And so now it almost feels like over compensating.
Sure.
So I'm still figuring that out, but yeah, it's affected literally every opportunity I've had since then has been affected by that experience.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that you're alone in that because certain opportunities are so exciting and so glamorous and so like a whirlwind, I think, that I
Yep.
think it's easy to sort of forget or focus on other things other than like what story we're telling as actors. So it makes sense to me, but
Totally.
that's a nice lesson to take with you.
Yeah, it's just like not don't ignore the fundamentals of whatever got you as far as it's gotten you in the first place, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
For
That's
sure.
helpful.
Yeah, good.
So, who is someone that is not in your network that you wish was, and how would you go about getting them in your network?
It's a good question. I tend to think of this so much in terms of teams or production companies, but I want to give you a more human answer than that, because my immediate instinct is to basically be like, I feel like the team at A24 does unbelievable things, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
get more work to them. I feel like the
Yeah.
team at Blumhouse does unbelievable things. I want to get my work to them. Um, to make it a little more human, Amy Seimetz is a director that I'm obsessed with. She did the Girlfriend Experience on Stars.
Mm.
I think she's a genius. The second season of that show, she and another director sort of split the season in half, and I think her season that she did was like the best thing on TV when it was on TV, which was either 2017 or 2018. I think
Nice.
maybe 2017. Um, I I want to work with Conan O'Brien because Conan O'Brien is an idol of mine, and I think his comedic sensibilities are perfect. And
Mm.
as a producer, because his production company creates such amazing things. Um, there's a just in terms of people I admire that it would just be a dream to work with that I don't even know how my work would align with theirs. But there's a filmmaker named Wanuri Kayu that I'm a huge fan of. I've been obsessed with her work for years since I saw it in a film festival years and years ago. Tim and Eric. In animation, there's Doc Hammer and Jackson Public. Those are their names. Who do the Venture Brothers? I think they're geniuses. So there's a long list. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the way the second part of your question is more the way I think about stuff,
Sure.
which is getting people into that orbit. And
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just been about trying to create the best work I possibly can and trying to get it out as far and wide, as relentlessly as I possibly can, nonstop every single day, to draw those people into the circle.
Hmm.
But it's not always, because in terms of a creative collaborator, I have my perfect creative collaborator, which is my writing partner, Christopher Meduno. So there's no one in that capacity I feel that I need.
Sure.
But for the work that Chris and I do together, there are people that having them in the circle would be just a dream.
So can you be more specific about like how, so like pick, a couple of those people that you mentioned and like how would you go, get in contact with them? Is it
Yeah.
just sort of like sending, emailing or, networking
Yeah.
with other people who might know them or?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that Chris and I have done this in the past, and one is I think I sound super repetitive, but the basic thing is just to do the best work you possibly can, and when that feels really ready to go, you've troubleshooted it and gotten it in front of people, and you think it's like rock solid. I think it's two paths. I think you utilize any connection or momentum you feel you possibly have with anybody, but I also think you get extremely organized and just blast your work out into the world. I may have told you the story in the past about how Chris and I got something produced, which is basically to initially, back in the day, to sit down, open a spreadsheet, research every single producer that we thought was even semi-relevant to the script we had and the kind of work we wanted to do. Find their contact information. There's many creative ways to do that. Deep dive internet searches, other less traditional ways to get folks' contact information. And just created a spreadsheet of like 300 people, put together the perfect cold pitch email, made sure everything's ready to go, and just cast as wide a net as we possibly could. I'm fortunate enough now that I'm able to do that in a much warmer way.
Sure.
I'm able to, like a lot of the people that I mentioned to you, I feel like with some of them, I'm 2 or 3 degrees removed from finding a way to work my way there.
Yeah.
and it's happening at its own pace. But I think if I wanted to turbocharge it, it goes back to the basics of like an excellent story or product. Get it to everyone you possibly can. If you know you have someone specific in mind, do that in an incredibly focused way. But there's even been people during this pandemic that have sort of asked me about stuff like that. And my thing to them has always been just get all of your tools in order. Make sure everything is rock solid, even if it seems painstaking or grueling, even if it seems like it couldn't possibly work. Get extremely organized, have the perfect hook email to differentiate yourself in some way, and blast out either your audition materials or a script you're trying to get funded or any kind of creative output as far and wide as you can go. Be strategic about it, really do your research. And if you cast a wide enough net and your work is differentiated, there's no question you'll get a response. It's just about being differentiated and differentiating yourself.
I think that's fantastic advice. Just being as organized with your stuff, who you are, what you're looking for, and what kind of art you make.
Totally.
And then you it's like magnetizing to the people who like feel that.
Yes.
And make the same type of art.
Yeah.
How did you figure that out?
I think part of this has to do with the motivation discipline thing. I think there was a certain point where I'd made a couple cool things happen, but I was looking for a way to turbocharge it. And I just kind of asked myself, like, is there anything at all that's in my control at all in order to be getting my work to people? And when I suddenly realized that even though it seems painstaking, even though it seems like you're just sort of tossing something out into the ether, that literally reaching out to anybody in the industry who you can possibly collaborate with or can add value to your work is in your control. And I started doing that, being like, there's no way this will work. And I was lucky enough to see results fairly quickly. But I think it was so empowering and so motivating to do that I feel like I would have continued to do it until I literally ran out of people to get my work to.
Well, it's kind of like the easiest thing. Like, it's so simple, maybe not easy, but it's simple. It's very simple advice, which is super empowering, I think, because, you know, it's tough to get all your materials in order and to make sure that you're, you know, well presented on an email. But once you have that, it's like you just write the thing and send it.
Yeah. My sister's asking, how is your sister?
Yes, please answer that.
My sister has inspired my work because of, well, actually, she was expecting a joke answer. I know she was, but I'll give you the real answer, which is that my mom and sister's love and support has made me feel that I can accomplish anything. And I just have two people in my life who my entire life have made me believe that I can accomplish impossible things. And I've accomplished a couple of things that have felt impossible, and it was because of them. Karen, you weren't expecting a real answer, were you? You thought I was going to give you a joke answer.
That was so sweet.
Yeah. I think I was going to tell you one other thing about that. What you're saying about it being simple, I completely agree. But back to your question about advice, I remember, I'll give you one of the worst pieces of advice I ever heard when I was in studio, ever, which was a teacher of mine who looked at the class and said, "You will not get an agent for a decade." Like, looked at everyone and said that. And I guess it was some kind of power play, and I remember challenging her on that, and she got really upset that I was challenging her, but I just remember being like, that's the worst fucking advice I've ever heard in my life. There's no way to, first of all, not only is it completely not true, but it immediately comes at this industry from a fear-based, defeatist place, as opposed to, are you doing every single thing you can possibly do to succeed? The cool thing is that when you see even this tiny bit of results, it's so empowering and so motivating that you find a lot of that fuel.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, even in my time at NYU, multiple times. You know, there's always that teacher mindset of, you know, you all probably won't make it, but maybe one of you will.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
And it's like that, and it's like, why would you say that? First of all, in my opinion, making it in whatever sense of that word isn't what it's about. And second of all, like you said, it comes at it from a very fear-based way, which I don't think is the way to learn, grow, or like find your own artistic identity, which is what college is for.
Yes. Yeah, totally. That's super well said. Yeah, fear can derail your entire life, basically. And when you're in a position to be getting guidance and someone has not conquered their own fear-based experiences and they're pouring that on you, it's such a like betrayal of that time together.
Yeah,
And
right.
a lot of people, I actually literally said this to somebody today, but a lot of people at NYU or on a creative track are making substantial, financial, mental health, social, or family sacrifices to be there. So when somebody is there being anything other than practical and helpful, it really fucking sucks. It's horrible. And yeah, what you're saying about making it, it doesn't even have to be about that. It's exactly what you're saying. Whatever your version of success is, and there's many different versions of success. I feel like the right approach is to acknowledge, yeah, it might be hard. Yes, there's a lot of challenges, but what are we doing here if not figuring out a way every single day to conquer those challenges as opposed to reinforcing that they exist? It's just the stupidest thing ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen to that. Well, we're just about out of time. That time flies when you're having fun.
Hell yeah.
Dana, my sister, shout out to the sisters who are watching
What's the deal with
today.
the sisters?
Gil, what projects are you working on now?
I think I
Can you
talk
disclose?
about it. I think so.
You can be vague if you need to.
I can be vague. I can. I was going to text Chris, but I'll just tell you. Well, man, whenever people ask me this, I'm so torn between being vague and sounding like I'm making it up, and then being specific but saying more than I'm supposed to.
Just be vague and we'll believe you.
Okay, one thing that Chris and I just finished is our first script for Disney, a script called Carved. We just delivered that a week ago.
Congratulations. Wow.
It's surreal.
That's huge.
We're in production. I don't know how much I can say about this. What I can say is we're working on a horror film that's essentially an allegory for immigration and keeping people out in a really intense horror-based way. What I can say about it is that it's by far the largest budget we've ever had for a feature film. That's probably all I can say about it for now. And then a third amazing thing is very ironic just in terms of the stuff you were asking me earlier about who I want to be working with, which is something that Chris and I just delivered that we're getting very positive traction on. And it's been weirdly happened during the pandemic. That's been the craziest part. So I've been very lucky in that way.
That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a lot of pots on the stove.
It's cool. Yeah, it feels good.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for taking the time on a Friday night to join me. That's so generous of you.
No, oh my God, this is awesome.
And for those people watching, y'all should go watch Gil in Tenured on Amazon Prime. It's pretty good. I've watched it. It's pretty funny.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
It was a great interview, and I took a lot away from it, and I think that our viewers did too.
That's great. This is awesome. It's also awesome that you're doing this. I think it's a nice way to bring a community together.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's been really cool. Yeah, it's sort of like the only thing that we can do right now, virtually. So that's what it is. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Gil, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Kels. You're the best.
Have a good one.
Bye.
All right, y'all. That's the end of our show. LOL, the dab. Classic Gil. Thanks for joining us and taking time on your Friday. I know I love ending my week with this show, and that was just a fantastic interview. Thanks, Jake. Hi, it's nice to see you. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.